On today's episode, I'll get into the latest updates on all the Blackhawks training camp battles as the preseason begins this week.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and follow me on X at Jack Bushman2. Be sure to go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account as well at Talkin' Hockey. That way, you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also got to let you know, today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. If you're not already a member, go and visit FanDuel.com right now to get $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed by placing just a $5 bet down with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I hope everyone tuning in, whether that's through YouTube or through an audio platform, enjoyed your weekends. Kind of felt like it was the last hoorah of the summer weather, if you will, before Sunday. There was just a torrential rainstorm basically the entire day. Kind of summed up the Chicago Bears' efforts against the Indianapolis Colts yesterday as well. And now it's looking like we're getting weather into the 60s and the 70s moving forward, at least for the next 10 days or so on the projected forecast. But what that means is hockey weather has officially arrived, Blackhawks fans, and we know the Blackhawks are now just 2 days removed from the start of the preseason. They'll be taking on the Detroit Red Wings this Wednesday night with a 7 p.m. Central Time puck drop at the United Center, getting some Blackhawks unofficial game action in here this week. And with that being the case, training camp battles are expected to only be ramping up. And I did want to be sure to open things up today before the Blackhawks go on and play the Red Wings on Wednesday. I will have a specific preview of that game coming out sometime on Wednesday afternoon. Be sure to be on the lookout for that as well. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be dropping a crossover with Seth Topal from Locked On Wild. I also am going to be having a crossover coming out with Jason Hernandez from Locked On Ducks, talking about both of our team's prospect pools, as they are widely considered to be two of the best, if not the two best prospect pools in the entire NHL, up there with the San Jose Sharks as well. So that should be a fun little conversation coming with Jason. There's also a Central Division roundtable that I have referenced in the past week that's going to be dropping on the last day of this month, next Monday. And then I'm also really trying to have Charlie Roumeliotis announced as the new Blackhawks WGN pre- and post-game host. Really trying to have him back here on the show. He's been on countless times throughout the last couple of years. One of my favorites, probably my favorite, if I'm being honest, on the Blackhawks beat. So lots of good Blackhawks stuff coming up. Again, please make sure to go and hit that subscribe button, smash the like, comment down below as well. But most importantly, subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. It's 100% free, won't cost you anything, and really does help me out tremendously. Really trying to hit that 2,000 subscriber margin before the Blackhawks open up the regular season on October 8th against Utah. So do me a huge favor, if you're a first-time viewer here on YouTube or someone who regularly watches the show and just haven't clicked that button yet, please make sure to do so. It really, really helps me, and I really do want to reach that number. It's been a goal of mine all summer long. But yes, getting back to my main point with the Blackhawks, opening up preseason action on Wednesday at the United Center. To open things up on the show here today, I wanted to go through a little bit of an update on all the Blackhawks training camp battles, because as I have already covered here on the show as well, there are just a boatload of Blackhawks notable storylines to be keeping an eye on and to be mindful of throughout these next couple of weeks. Want to be sure to give the latest updates that we have on some of those battles, with the preseason set to begin here in just a couple of days. But quite honestly, Blackhawks fans don't have like a ton of updates to get into, but that's mostly because the Blackhawks have just been continuing this scrimmage-like practicing down at Fifth Third Arena, as they have have been every day since things opened up last Thursday. They've really wanted to keep with that intensity, but because they've been going through all of these scrimmages, and sometimes guys aren't scrimmaging on certain days and guys are, jumbled up and mixed with different groups, we're not really seeing a lot of interchanging line combinations or defensive pairings at this point in time. And what that tells me, and I'll kind of hammer this home again a little bit later, is that the preseason is really going to make or break these battles. And I'll have a quote from Luke Richardson that I'll actually talk about that kind of emphasizes that point. I'll get to in just a moment here. But just because the Blackhawks are going with these scrimmage like training camp battles right out of the gate, yes, they are certainly notable, but because they're so early, I really do think they just want to kind of get everyone's feet wet and get them ready for the intensity that's going to be coming with the rest of the regular season and everything moving forward. I do think, these scrimmages are notable. You certainly, especially if you're a guy who's trying to earn a job or a fringe player, I absolutely think these scrimmages are notable and you want to be having good and noteworthy performances. But I really believe these preseason games and kind of the practices and then those scrimmages and the drills and whatnot that follow that stuff, I think that's going to be more important than kind of what we've seen here these last couple of days. But yeah, that's basically what the Blackhawks have been going with Friday, Saturday, and even here today. They opened up action at 10 a.m. Central Time early on in the morning with yet another scrimmage, not really working on like individual line rushes or drills, but kind of getting the boys ready for just game-like situations, which, should have them more than ready to rock and roll when they open things up on Wednesday against the Red Wings. But the first thing I want to touch base on here, since I haven't gotten to it yet, I did talk about the forward lines that we have seen the Blackhawks roll with in the last episode that I dropped, but I haven't gotten to the defensive pairings yet. And interestingly enough, Coach Luke Richardson has not rolled with the Alex Vlasic-Seth Jones duo that was the Blackhawks top line for basically the entirety of the year, all of the second half of the season. Really expected that duo to remain together to at least open up training camp, but no, that has not been the case, as Seth Jones on the top pairing for the Blackhawks has actually been skating with newcomer Alec Martinez, which I think is an interesting choice. I figured Martinez was going to be someone who possibly could be playing on his offside with one of the younger defensemen a little bit down in the lineup further on the second pairing or the third pairing potentially, but feels like Luke Richardson wants to give him a chance to establish a shutdown pairing with Seth Jones as well at the top of things, and that could also allow the Blackhawks depth to kind of kick in. If you have Alex Vlasic down on the second pairing, you don't have to rely on, just a one pairing rotation like they did so many times last year. That certainly could help things out, but a very interesting decision by Richardson right out of the gate to not go back to the Vlasic-Jones duo that found a lot of success anchoring things on the back end for the Blackhawks last year. It's Alec Martinez, the newcomer and multi-time Stanley Cup champion, joining Seth on the top pairing as of right now. We'll see if that's the case, if both of them wind up playing in the preseason opener on Wednesday. Alex Vlasic, since he's not on the top pairing, has been bumped down to the second pairing, playing with TJ Brodie, newcomer from the Calgary Flames, who has been in a top four role for basically all of his career. I believe he's averaged over 20 minutes per game in each of his last 11 seasons and 11 of his 13 career years in the NHL. So very familiar with this type of role. Not surprised to see TJ Brodie there on his off wing, by the way, something that he has done in the past back when he was a really solid defender anchoring that pairing with Mark Giordano, one of the better shutdown pairings in the league at that point in time with the Calgary Flames. TJ Brodie was playing on his off wing. So that is something that he's accustomed to. Again, we'll see if that Vlasic-Brodie pairing wind up sticking together, or if we see Richardson go back to Vlasic and Jones at some point in the preseason. How is that going to affect Martinez and Brodie? Because I don't think you want to put them on a pairing together. I think you kind of want to share the wealth a little bit on the back end. So we'll see what winds up happening there. But Martinez with Jones, Vlasic with Brodie, and that leaves Wyatt Kaiser, interestingly enough, with Connor Murphy on the Blackhawks' so-called third defensive pairing at this point in time. And one of the training camp battles when I kind of took a look at the Blackhawks roster and all of the names, and I split things into the NHL group, the AHL group, and the prospect group, it was pretty clear to me that it's either going to be, unless something crazy happens, it's going to be a battle between Wyatt Kaiser and Kevin Korchinski for for basically the final roster spot, I believe, for the Blackhawks on the back end. Because as I'll get to in just a moment, I think, and this isn't a new take of mine for those of you who are regular listeners or viewers of the show, I think Isaac Phillips is a perfect fit for the seventh defenseman for the Blackhawks this year. And that would leave one spot available if he does get that seventh defenseman spot for Wyatt Kaiser or Kevin Korchinski, because I don't think you want either of those two guys in particular serving as the seventh defenseman. You'd prefer for them to be in Rockford, playing in meaningful minutes, all kinds of situations, and just getting more game-like experience rather than just practicing and being around the NHL guys and getting reps, once a week or once every 2 weeks. I don't think that's a good spot for either of those two guys. So I feel like it's going to be a battle between Korchinski and Kaiser as to who's going to get that final spot. And if the regular season was going to start right here, right now, it looks like Richardson would have Wyatt Kaiser over Kevin Korchinski, which is a decision I understand. Kaiser obviously is the older of the two prospects, got some marinating down in Rockford towards the ends of last year after making the Blackhawks roster out of training camp. There are a lot of similarities, though, I feel like, between Kaiser and Korchinski. They both need to grow into better defensemen and need to be a little bit more capable in their own end. Both undersized, puck-moving defensemen who are known for their skating abilities. Korchinski obviously has the higher ceiling and the offensive abilities of the two and is the better skater. But there are a lot of similarities between those two guys. But I would agree, if there was one player who has a leg up over another before the preseason begins, I would say it's Wyatt Kaiser, just because of his age and having a little bit more experience, just being a little bit more physically mature than Kevin Korchinski is. I think that would give him the edge. However, I believe the preseason games, as I referenced earlier, are really going to tell the tale between whether it's going to be Korchinski or Kaiser on the Blackhawks opening night roster. Also on the back end, Kevin Korchinski, as I said, not involved in those top three pairings, which kind of tells me he's on the outside looking in right now. He's been skating with Louis Crevier, who also could be in the race for the seventh defenseman spot for the Blackhawks, although I think that would much better fit Isaac Phillips, given he has more experience than Crevier at this point in time and doesn't really have anything left to prove at the AHL level. Then we saw Ethan Del Mastro and Nolan Allen skating with one another. I figure both of those guys, unless something crazy happens, are going to open up the year in Rockford. No surprise there. And that kind of left Austin Strand along with Isaac Phillips. And again, I just think Isaac Phillips is in this weird in-between stage where he's not maybe a true NHLer, but he also shouldn't be going back down to Rockford and taking minutes and taking a job away from one of the youngsters who could really learn and use those experiences. That's why I feel like Phillips is in this weird in-between where he just needs to be that seventh defenseman. And quite honestly, I don't think you brought him back as an RFA to send him back to Rockford, right? Like, if he's going down to Rockford at this point still, like, you're pretty disappointed with that, and you probably don't have much high expectations for him moving forward. The fact that they brought him back, I think, to me signifies that they want to give him NHL time. They want to have him around the NHLers, and I think the seventh defenseman spot just kind of fits too well. So going to be really interesting to see what kind of goes down with this Blackhawks blue line over the next couple of weeks before things open up for real on October 8th against the Utah Hockey Club. Did want to add this one quote, though, from Kyle Davidson, which again, to me, just reiterates how much preseason is going to mean in terms of all of these battles and determining the winner. When asked about whether Kevin Korchinski could be a good fit for the Rockford Ice Hogs this year, Davidson said it could potentially be an option for Korchinski since he is now officially AHL eligible, but he did say, quote, "We'll let the players decide where they should be and we'll go from there." So it's going to be fun to see both of those guys along with, the newcomers on the Blackhawks blue line, Alec Martinez and TJ Brody, in the preseason. We'll see how these defensive pairings wind up shifting and changing over these next couple of weeks. Whenever they do shift or change, if they do, I guess I should say, I'll be sure to talk about it and let you all know all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates right here on Locked On Blackhawks. Gonna take a quick break here, Blackhawks fans, but coming up in just a moment, when I return, I'll get into the latest news we have on the battles going down in the Blackhawks forward group. But first, I got to talk to you all about one of today's sponsors, a new sponsor here on the Locked On Podcast Network, actually, which is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members at the moment. And Prize Picks is also the easiest and most exciting way for you to play daily fantasy sports. All you got to do is pick the easiest and, all you got to do is pick more or less, specifically, the easiest ones you can find out there, more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in. And by the way, one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. That's right, 4 weeks of free W's. And one thing that I also love about Prize Picks is that it's the only real daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players get injured. So be sure to go and download the Prize Picks app today and to use the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5 down. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Prize Picks, run your game. I also need to talk to you all real quick about Indeed. We're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, but match with Indeed. If you need to hire, then you need Indeed, because Indeed is the best matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates in an instant. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And one of the things that I personally love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so simple and so easy, because you can skip out on the countless job sites that ask unnecessary info and don't wind up leading you anywhere. Instead, go and join the more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent in an instant. And listeners or viewers of this show, you will get a free $75 sponsored job credit that'll help get your jobs more visibility if you go and visit Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon to get a $75 sponsored job credit that'll get your jobs more visibility. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to say thank you again to everyone who made Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. Now for your second listen, be sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing expertise, national expertise with a local perspective. And you can easily find the link to Locked On NHL down in the description of this video on YouTube, or simply search Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, getting into the training camp battles that are going down in the Blackhawks forward group. We really haven't seen any line juggling whatsoever from the NHL lines, if you will. But we have seen, like I said, some solid performances, a lot of guys who are on the cusp trying to get notable performances, trying to make the coaching staff pay attention to them and trying to earn one of those few jobs that are available before October 8th arrives. But it's really going to come down to the preseason. We're really going to find out the most about these guys when the game action actually begins. And that's why I'm so excited for things to begin on Wednesday against the Detroit Red Wings. But as I referenced, we really haven't seen any line mixes going on. So Taylor Hall, Tyler Bertuzzi have remained with Connor Bedard on the Blackhawks top line. I've mentioned Taylor Hall is someone who many people have said has been very notable here so far in this camp, a guy that's kind of chomping at the bit to get back out there and knowing he's going to get a really good opportunity to go and prove himself once again, like he was supposed to get last year until the season unfortunately got cut short for him. But he looks like he's someone who is really, really trying to make the most out of this opportunity. And that's absolutely what you love to hear. A guy who is coming in from day one, working his tail off, playing with a lot of good energy, a lot of good pace. And that's what we need alongside Connor Bedard, a real competent, skilled like forward who can play at the same speed, think the game the same way that he does, and wants to be there, is working his tail off alongside. So love to hear that out of Taylor Hall. And I've also been hearing that Connor Bedard and Tyler Bertuzzi have been establishing a very nice chemistry with one another here. So I fully anticipate that to be the trio leading the Blackhawks forward group when they open things up against the Red Wings, should they be in the lineup, which I kind of figure is going to be the case. And on the second line, we have seen Lukas Reichel remain with Philip Kurashev and Teuvo Teravainen. Kurashev still playing the center position, which is something that I don't think he did at all throughout the course of last season. It's been probably 2 years or maybe even more since we've really seen Kurashev as a full-time center. So clearly there is a little bit of a hole in the Blackhawks lineup. There is an opportunity, I think, there, more importantly, for Frank Nazar. That's the spot if he's going to earn his way onto this NHL roster, which feels like a little bit of a long shot at this point in time, just given the amount of numbers that the Blackhawks have. But that's the spot. Same with Andreas Athanasiou, a guy who's a little bit further down in the lineup, that second line center spot, even though he really hasn't been a center before coming to Chicago. That has been something that he's done here for this organization. So I'm sure that's a spot he's trying to get back to as well. So that second line center spot, definitely up for grabs here throughout the preseason. But Lukas Reichel getting that top six spot was something that I think surprised a pretty good amount of us, especially with Andreas Athanasiou kind of being on the outside looking in, and the pace that Athanasiou could play with, the lackluster season that Lukas Reichel had last year. Given that the Blackhawks made some notable additions to their forward group, I thought the third line was going to be more talented than it had been here in quite a while. So I figured that's where Reichel was going to be, but to see him in a top six spot, I absolutely like that. I think it is the right spot for him. But now it's just kind of up to him in order to stay there. And that's really what Luke Richardson kind of hammered home to the media as far as his expectations for Lukas Reichel here in training camp. Richardson said, quote, "My expectation is that Reichel competes hard for a top six spot. We got bodies, so he's going to have to earn that. He's going to have to come in and take that role. It's on him in a way. We don't want him playing on the fourth line or anything like that, but he's been around enough to know what the expectation is and what the NHL requires from a consistency standpoint." I think that's a really notable quote there for multiple different reasons from Luke Richardson, obviously alluding to all of the bodies that the Blackhawks brought in here. I've referenced that time and time again on this show. They want everyone competing from the top line all the way down to the guys who are trying to claw for those extra forward spots, right? Like, we want everyone fighting hard from the get-go, because that vibe, that intensity, we're hoping is going to just snowball and carry over to the start of the regular season. And this is the beginning of a new era, a new leaf here for the Chicago Blackhawks. So I love to hear that, Richardson, these are his expectations for a guy like Lukas Reichel. And as I've alluded to as well, if he provides, or if any of these guys provide anything less than what is kind of the standard or what we expect them to bring, it's not going to be good enough. Then they're in jeopardy of losing that position. So I love to hear that that's the mentality. And Lukas Reichel, as Richardson said, should know that at this point in time. I thought it was interesting, though, to hear him say, we don't want Lukas Reichel playing on the fourth line, when Luke Richardson was the very man who was playing Lukas Reichel down on the third and fourth line for multiple stretches of games last year. I know it was to send a message, but I think Luke and I would agree, and all of us Blackhawks fans would agree, that's not really a spot for Lukas Reichel to succeed. And he's kind of even openly saying that to the media here. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting, but again, just hammering home, it's on Lukas Reichel. If he wants to be a top six player for the Chicago Blackhawks this year, of the future, of the rebuild, starts right here, right now, man. The opportunity is there for the taking. He's just got to run with it. But I love to hear Reichel as well, kind of saying that he's in a much better headspace right now. He's much more confident in his game. Kind of had a little bit of a weird training regimen last year, if you all remember. The Blackhawks specifically kept Lucas Reichel off of the ice in the summer of 2023 for like 2 months to kind of work on his strength, to beef him up and make him a more stronger and difficult player to play against out there on the ice. That kind of ended up backfiring, I think, for Reichel. And he said he's been much more on the ice here this summer, working on his shot, his lower body and that stuff. Been taking some stuff away from Connor Bedard's shot and the way that he shoots the puck and trying to kind of translate that to his game. So hopefully Lucas Reichel is in a position to go and take this chance and run with it, because that's really what it's going to take in order for him to secure a top 6 spot here for the Blackhawks come October 8th against Utah. Third line has remained the same, which could be low-key one of the best shutdown defensive trios in all of hockey. I firmly believe Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev. I think that is a really, really sound defensive trio. Jason Dickinson, don't know if he's going to be able to replicate exactly what he did on the offensive side of things, but we're not really asking him to do that once again, given the additions that we've made inside the top 6. We just want him to continue to hone in on his craft on the defensive side of things. And he has 2 real good guys next to him, and Nick Foligno, who can play a rugged style, Mikheyev, who skates well and is known for his defensive abilities. Probably the most offensively gifted player of the 3 on that line, but that trio should be doing a lot of good work for Luke Richardson and the Blackhawks in defensive situations. And then still rounding things out, the trio of Patrick Maroon, Andreas Athanasiou, and Craig Smith, which is a trio that I fully do not expect to open up the regular season together on the Blackhawks' 4th line. To me, that is just a trio that really doesn't make a lot of sense. Andreas Athanasiou, just isn't a 4th line player, and just doesn't, I just don't think he's going to mix well with Pat Maroon or Craig Smith. Just too many different styles there. I think Athanasiou could bring some good wheels there, but I don't really know how to feel about that 4th line at this point in time. So we'll see what winds up happening there. But 2 guys on the outside looking in right now, Ryan Donato and Joey Anderson, still appear to be, at this point in time, the 2 healthy scratch forwards if the regular season was to open right here, right now. But Ryan Donato is someone who apparently has been very notable, was super physical, apparently, I heard in today's scrimmage. So the message has clearly been sent to him. He's trying to get on watch by this coaching staff. And then we know what Joey Anderson is capable of doing on the defensive side of things as well. But I do think he kind of fits of being an extra forward that you feel comfortable sliding into the lineup whenever you need maybe a little bit more defense or a little bit more jam up front in that kind of sense. Also thought it was interesting, though, to see AJ Spellacy taking Landon Slaggert's spot on this trio. Slaggert has been with those other 2 guys, Donato and Anderson, since training camp opened up last Thursday. Feels like the Blackhawks really like what they've seen from AJ Spellacy. And I mean, there's a lot to like already at his age of 18, 6'3", 6'4", over 200 pounds, and can absolutely fly. If he can continue to develop his skill game over these next couple of years, he is going to be a really intriguing player. And even if he doesn't, just kind of his unique characteristics, I think is going to give him an opportunity to make it to the NHL one day and possibly be a piece of the puzzle here in Chicago. So notable that Spellacy getting an opportunity with 2 guys who figure to be part of the Blackhawks NHL roster. And then rounding things out, Colton Dach, Frank Nazar, Nick Lardis. Really hope to see that trio together in the preseason for the Blackhawks at least once, or to see Lardis up on the top line with Bedard, to see Nazar maybe as the second line center with Teuvo Teravainen and Lucas Reichel. I don't know. Those are guys that definitely deserve a crack or 2, though. In the preseason, it sounds like that's what we're going to be getting. Luke Richardson, when kind of asked about training camp cuts, mentioned that he does want to give players who are fighting for spots plenty of opportunities, and that they could even see 4 to 5 out of the Blackhawks' 6 preseason games. So as I referenced earlier, I really believe these preseason games are going to determine the winners and the losers of these training camp battles. The scrimmages are obviously important. You want to get off to a noticeable start. You want to get all the coaches talking about you. You want the buzz to be palpable. But those preseason games, to me, are when the battles are going to be won and lost. And I love to hear that Richardson is going to give guys who are in those battles, which is, I mean, a pretty good chunk of the roster, if we're being honest here. He's going to give them a good amount of preseason games. So during these next couple of weeks, a lot of meaningful ice time, a lot of meaningful situations going down out there for the Blackhawks, even though it is the preseason. Should be a lot of fun in many different ways to watch this team hit the ice when things open up on Wednesday against the Red Wings. That's going to wrap up the latest updates we have from the Blackhawks training camp battles. I'll be sure to continue talking about this throughout the rest of Blackhawks training camp. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube so you don't miss out on any of the latest news or updates. Going to take one final break here on today's show, but when I return, still got to get into our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. I know you've all heard about FanDuel at this point in time, right? Of course you have. But to all of my NFL fans out there, you can now start the NFL season with a big return over at FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go and check out the latest stats. You can also view live play-by-play action and so much more on the same page, where you also happen to place your bets. And to all of my Blackhawks fans out there, FanDuel has now dropped the over-under lines for each and every team's projected point totals for the 2024-2025 regular season. The Blackhawks currently listed at 74.5, which I think is a really savvy line by FanDuel. And I want to go over. Like, obviously, my heart is telling me to go over the additions the Blackhawks made. I think they're going to be much, much better than they've been these last couple of years. However, you got to remember, they only put up 52 52 points last year, This is a big time jump. And I ultimately, when projecting what I think the Blackhawks are going to do this year, I think they wind up somewhere between 70 and 78 points. But if you're feeling encouraged on the chances for the Blackhawks this year, if you're thinking they're going to hammer that over 74.5, you can go and place a bet down with FanDuel. And if you're not already signed up, be sure to create an account. And when you put $5 down, you'll get a free $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. Yes, you heard me right. Sign up today at FanDuel.com, put $5 down, and you'll get $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed that you can bet on anything from the NHL to the NFL, from the Bears to the Blackhawks. You don't want to miss out on free money, an opportunity to get even more free money. Who doesn't love that? Make sure to go take advantage by visiting FanDuel.com right now, America's #1 sportsbook. Real quick, just another reminder that Locked On Blackhawks has Mailbag Monday each and every week, but this segment won't be possible if I don't get questions from you, the viewers, and the listeners out there. Please make sure to reach out with your Blackhawks-related question or just even life questions. I love having fun during this segment here to wrap things up every Monday. You can email LockedOnBlackhawks@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on any one of my social media accounts at Jack Bushman2 on X, at Talkin' Hockey on X, or you can also even drop in the YouTube comments below right now, obviously, or hit the community tab on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. Please make sure to reach out with your Blackhawks related questions. I only have a few to get to this week, but I know lots of you viewers and listeners have questions with the regular season just a couple weeks away. First question I want to get to here today, though, comes from PHHDVM on YouTube, who is a regular listener and watcher. I greatly appreciate the support. Thank you very much. And thank you for reaching out with your question, which was, as far as camp goes, I'm less interested in players who are locks to be playing in Chicago and more interested in players who are trying to make the team. Pretty much agreed. I would say the battles between kind of even the guys who are secure in NHL jobs, that's what's really interesting to me as well. For example, Korchinski and Kaiser, are they going to be in Chicago or Rockford? Talked about this a little bit earlier, so I don't mean to kind of beat the drum twice, but I ultimately do think it's going to be one or the other on the Blackhawks opening night roster. I don't think they both wind up in Chicago or they both wind up in Rockford. I think it's going to be one in one spot and then one in the other. If I had to guess right here, right now, I do ultimately think it's Wyatt Kaiser who has the edge over Kevin Korchinski. I just think with the Blackhawks being in this spot where they want to be patient, and had the AHL been an option for Korchinski last year, that's certainly where he would have been. And I think they do want to give him a taste of AHL action in all situations there, and not have to worry of him going up against, the top skill level like we see at the NHL, while you can also still develop his game and give him, unique situations where the risk isn't as high when things go negatively, right? Like the Blackhawks, there are expectations for them on the ice. You don't want both the team's goals and Kevin Korchinski's individual goals to go sour at the same point in time. So for those reasons, I do ultimately think it winds up being Wyatt Kaiser on the opening night roster. But as I've talked about time and time again on this episode, it's going to come down to the preseason, whichever one of those two players has the better effort and makes the more noticeable impact to the team in those, 4 to 5 preseason games that we expect them to get. I think that's who winds up with the job. Kevin Korchinski undoubtedly has the higher ceiling of the two. I think he probably is the better player of the two already, if I had to guess. Kaiser just has age and experience over him and is probably a little bit more physically matured, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Korchinski beat him out one bit. I do think Kaiser at this point in time, though, has the leg up and is the likely favorite over Korchinski. Next question comes from Mel Rosner, who emailed in the podcast and asked, what happens first? Bedard hits 50 goals or the Blackhawks get back to the playoffs? Really interesting question here, Mel. Oh boy. All right. So projecting when I think the Blackhawks can make the playoffs, I don't think it's going to be this year, obviously, but I do think 2025, 2026, next year, is really when they could be on the cusp of legitimately doing it once again. It's either going to be 2025, 26, or 26, 27. I don't think Bedard's going to hit 50 this year. Even 40 would be a lot for him. I'm going to go the Blackhawks go back to the playoffs first. 50 is just a lot. And they probably happen right around the same time. They're probably synonymous with one another, but I'm going to go the Blackhawks getting back to the playoffs. Wouldn't be mad, though, if Bedsy winds up hitting 50 goals, in the 2025-2026 season. Next question comes from Mark1958 WWJD on YouTube, who asked, and bear with me here for everyone else who didn't ask this question. I was a little bit confused, but I always try to do the viewers a favor. If you reach out with a question, I always try to answer it, but I'll do my best here. Who can fill in some of the 7 Hawks spots that'll make up the core going forward? Who do we know will make up the next 6 second-tier players, and who may stick around as the support 5? That is 18 players, 12 forwards, and 6D. How many of these blanks can we fill in at this point? All right, it's kind of a confusing question there, but what I do understand is the 18 players, 12 forwards, and 6D. Out of those 18 blanks, I think is what's being asked. How many can we fill in? Not very many, truly, because even the additions that the Blackhawks made this offseason to bring in some veterans, I don't think there's, much hope of them being long-term pieces of the puzzle, I would say. Connor Bedard is for sure a puzzle piece. We know that. I think Kevin Korchinski is a for sure puzzle piece. I think Alex Vlasic is a for sure puzzle piece. Seth Jones is a for sure puzzle piece, whether you like it or not, Blackhawks fans, because guess what? That contract guarantees that he is. Other than that, who's really a guaranteed piece of the puzzle here? Philip Kurashev looks like a good player. Is he a guaranteed piece of the puzzle? I don't really know. Lucas Reichel, wouldn't say he's guaranteed at this point in time. I want to say Frank Nazar is a guaranteed piece of the puzzle, but we just don't have a big enough sample size to guarantee that he's going to be at the NHL level, but I really believe he is going to be. Other than that, there are still a lot of unknowns for the future of this Blackhawks. So how many would that be? We have Bedard, Vlasic. I mean, you could even make an argument about Korchinski. The jury's still out there for sure. Bedard, Vlasic, Jones, Korchinski, 4 to 5. So, yeah, I mean, that's why this year is still kind of another filler year for the Blackhawks, because there are still so many things we got to find out about this team this year. Next question comes from Ty 12345Ys BDF 49 on X, who asked, early Stanley Cup prediction. Oh boy, haven't really even thought about this. And when I wrote this question down, I told myself to think about it and accidentally completely forgot. Early Stanley Cup prediction. Early Stanley Cup prediction. This is tough because For those who have been a longtime listener or viewer of the show, I think I've gone with the Lightning and the Stars in like 5 of the last 6 years. Those have just been teams I've really, really liked. And I did win the Lightning once of their 2 years. Never won the Stars, of course. Boy, oh boy. Really good one. Really good question. Colorado from the West, I really like. Edmonton. I'm going to go back with Edmonton. I'm going to go with Edmonton from the West. From the East, I'm going to go Boston. Go Boston. Final question I have here on today's episode is from Anna Miller, who emailed in and asked, how many wins did the Blackhawks get this year out of 82? I mentioned I think they finished somewhere between 70 and 78 points. I think they probably win 33 out of 42 games. 33 wins. That gives them 66 points, somewhere between 7 to 10 overtime losses. They're getting a point in around half their games this year is what I kind of think is a fair expectation for this Blackhawks team. They have to get to 30 wins, though. They have to win 30 games this year. I expect them ultimately, though, to win somewhere between 30 and 35. But that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's available each and every day. If you want to check me out on X, you can find me at Jack Bushman 2, but be sure to go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, though, Blackhawks fans, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Crossover with Seth Tupal from Locked On Wild coming tomorrow morning, and then on Wednesday afternoon, I will have one final preview before the Blackhawks open up the preseason against the Detroit Red Wings. Until then, everyone have a great rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.